Welcome to Behavioral Grooves, the podcast that explores why we do what we do, as well as how a better understanding of human behavior can help us make better choices in work, in life, and everywhere in between. I'm Kurt Nelson.
And I'm Tim Houlihan. And today's episode is about something most of us think we understand pretty well. That is, until it stops working.
Yeah, right. We're talking about dating. We're talking about relationships, attraction, and this idea of partnership. We carry around a lot of stories about how all of this should work, but we don't always get the facts straight, Tim. We don't really understand how it could work really well into our lives.
Yeah. And a lot of us tell ourselves interesting stories like we're modern humans, we're evolved past our human instincts, and how love is mostly about shared values, good communication, and maybe a little bit of chemistry.
Okay. All right. Now, and while none of that is wrong, it's definitely not the whole story.
Yeah, you see, beneath all of our apps and norms and expectations and cultural rules, we're still using an operating system in our brain that was designed for a very different and ancient world.
Yeah, that world which was made up of small tribes, high risk, scarce resources, and a very asymmetric biological stakes.
Which leads us to today's big behavioral science aha, and that is modern dating problems aren't just random. They are predictable mismatches between ancient biological tendencies and a radically new and different environment.
Yeah, our guest today has spent years exploring exactly that mismatch. And he's going to share how we can best address that.
Tim Ash is a past Behavioral Grooves guest when we talked to him as the author of Unleash Your Primal Brain. He's also the co-author of a new book called Primal Dating, which takes an evolutionary psychology lens to modern relationships. Now, while the book is full of important dating tips, the big insights are there to help us understand the forces shaping attraction, choice, and conflict.
And what makes this conversation especially interesting is that Tim Ash isn't arguing that biology is destiny. In fact, he'll argue that we have agency to make changes in our lives, which I think we all want.
We do. And at the same time, he's there to remind us that our biology does create tendencies and that ignoring those tendencies leads to poor results.
Yeah. And in this episode, Tim Houlihan, talked to Tim Ash about why dating feels increasingly broken, how cultural overlays distort our expectations, why life stages matter far more than we think, and why calling the dating world a marketplace is both useful and dangerously incomplete. And I wasn't part of that conversation. Says I was stuck on a plane.
I recall this flimsy excuse like, my original flight got canceled, so I have to be on a different plane, and or something like that. I don't know. As if I never heard that before.
Thank you. Thank you for doing the fantastic job that you do. And I'm sure people will be very happy that I wasn't part of this because I would have just ruined it anyway.
It was Team Tim,
Yeah.
So it worked.
All right. All right. So, but it was a really great conversation, and we hope you'll check out the Tim Connection conversation. If you've ever wondered why smart, well-intentioned people keep running into the same over and over relationship frustrations.
Yeah. Or why attraction only rarely follows the rules that we say that we really believe in.
Yeah. So this is an episode that you'll want to sit with.
I think so. For now, we'd like to encourage you to sit back and relax with a generous cup of relationship soup and enjoy our conversation with Tim Ash. Tim Ash, welcome back to Behavioral Grooves.
Tim, it's great to be with you in the company of other great Tims.
Today, it's the Tim Fest because Kurt is not here due to some travel troubles. And so it's Tim Fest. I think that we should just enjoy it for ourselves. Okay, but we have to start with our regular speed round. And so first question, if you had to live a year without either your laptop or your mobile phone, which would you give up?
My laptop, because I associated more with work.
Oh, wow. Wow. That is really, most people are like, I'm happy to get rid of the phone because it distracts me too much. But the work thing,
No, I won't
interesting.
lie. I use my camera. I'm a photographer, so I use my Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra because it's great cameras. I mean, so a friend of mine once told me a camera is the best camera is the one you have with you, and so I like to have a good camera on my phone.
That's good advice. Okay, second speed round question. If you inherited a house that would cost you nothing to maintain, where in the world would that house be?
Ooh, well, I'm already living in my top five, which is San Diego, California. I might move it a
Okay.
little closer to the beach. I'm about a mile away, but yeah,
How much closer? How much closer?
well, within ocean view, so that means a couple of blocks to the crest of the hill, right?
Okay, not right on the water?
No, then you're just watching darkness for every time night falls. So.
Oh, okay. That's very strategic. It sounds like you've thought about this.
Oh, yes. And so other places all have something in common. Melbourne, Australia, Lisbon, Barcelona, Sydney,
Yeah.
they're all beautiful,
Ocean views.
cosmopolitan, yeah, ocean cities.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. Okay, I love that. All right, third speed round question. Tell me if this statement is true or false. Human dating behaviors are still stuck in a hunter gatherer world that is extremely different from our modern society.
True. Ding, ding, ding. Do I win something?
Okay.
Yeah, I guess we're going to talk about my Primal Dating book.
We are definitely going to talk about primal dating. But after we get through our last speed round question, and that is, in your opinion, is the dating scene just another marketplace for winners and losers, negotiations, and price sensitive deals?
It is. And there's a lot of distortions in it. So when we talk about marketplace, that means efficiency. That means equal number of buyers and sellers. We can talk about why the
Yeah,
modern dating
utility.
place is,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
is not that. It's just like we
Right.
call our society capitalism when it's run by a bunch of giant monopolies. It's not capitalism either.
Right. Okay. Well, let's actually we're going to come back to that because we want to start this conversation with Tim Ash talking about his newest book with co-author Dr. Limor. Is it correct? Am I so
Lemore
correct?
Gottlieb, yes.
Yeah, Limor Gottlieb. Okay. And the book is Primal Dating, as Tim is holding up there. The last time we talked was April 2021. It's been
Wow.
5 years, almost five
The
years.
middle of the pandemic. I know that was
Yeah.
shortly after I published. I think we were talking about my previous book, Unleash Your Primal Brain, which is basically like a user manual for human beings from an evolutionary psychology perspective. I'd say is the best description.
Right. And by the way, I love this because following this primal theme, you're continuing to plumb the depths of evolutionary psychology, which there
Mhm.
is so much to learn from.
Yeah.
And and,
Well,
and, and I'm glad you're doing it.
and it's funny. I just graduated to the sixth floor. I just turned 60 this past summer, and I realized that
Welcome.
Thank you, thank you. And I feel like I'm leaning more into what I would call wisdom. It's not specific knowledge about holograms or AI or whatever is up next. It's about these deep wells of wisdom to which you can return. And for me, evolutionary psychology is that. It helps explain everything. Um,
Yeah.
all human behavior is a function of what we evolved for, and that includes business. I do a lot of stuff, obviously, with my former marketing agency and leadership and how to initiate people into your work tribe. That's all business stuff. But then relationships, like we're going to talk about. My next book's going to be about health and wellness from an evolutionary perspective. What we evolved for, how we broke it, and how to get back to that primal wellness. So to me, the root of all of this is that we're all just cavemen in modern clothes. And that gives me this deep well of wisdom to return to.
I've heard that it's been said that basically from the time of Homo sapien that our brains were about as developed as our brains are today. That there's a lot of similarity in our brains that you could teach a Homo sapien, 500,000 years ago, to do the same kind of math and have the same kind of reading skills and similar as to what we have today.
Yeah, we like to think we're some kind of new and better model, but you're absolutely right. The Homo sapiens branched off, depending on who you talk to, 2 to 300,000 years ago. So that's 10,000 generations. And on an evolutionary time scale, some things have changed. We have smaller jaws. I had to have my wisdom teeth removed because we don't need to chew as much. There's small adaptations, but brain-wise, we are exactly the same. You're absolutely right. We had the capacity for language, for making art, for social structures, and the ability to plan, all of it. There were modern humans 200,000 years ago that were identical to us.
I want to start with, thank you for that. I want to start with, what is it about dating in the modern world that is still primal?
Uh, the short answer is everything. As much as we want to believe otherwise. So here's kind of how I think about it: is that we're highly cultural creatures, as people. I had devoted a couple of chapters to that in Unleash Your Primal Brain book. Culture kind of co-evolved us, and so we really look at our surrounding tribe and how to survive in our environment. And so we take on a bunch of cultural beliefs. That's what makes us tribal, polarizes our politics when it misfires, all of this. So we have a lot of beliefs about relationships and dating and the differences between men and women that are anchored in these cultural overlays, let's call them. And so what we tried to do in this book is just to really step back from that and say, let's look at the species level stuff and that we shared with our ancestors 200,000 years ago. And again, this is 10,000 generations. Maybe for the last 100, some of us went from hunting gathering to farming. And over the last 2 or 3, we got the birth control pill and women entering the workforce and massive changes all of a sudden. And so the point is, on the time scale of evolution, nothing has changed. So all of our basic tendencies, which is life, to reproduce, to find a reliable mate, all of those things are the same. And so all of it is primal, but we just have to dig beneath these cultural overlays. And the ways you can do that, just to finish off the thought, is that you look at what works, what things have existed in human societies across all time and in all places. And that's the root stuff we're talking about. So that's going to take you to the level of general tendencies and not swimming against the tide. There are huge exceptions to things at an individual level, but that doesn't change the fact that we're jealous, that we're not monogamous as a species, that younger women are preferred by all men. There's like all of these evolutionary reasons that are true in all places and at all times.
You explore these evolutionary foundations in the book, and I want to talk more about some specifics. But in a short answer, why should people read this book? Well, both, and it's, by the way, it's for both men and women. I just to be really clear.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, it's an easy and fun read. Okay, we have some bitter medicine in there for both men and women.
Yeah,
but we tried to wrap it up in some humor, and it's a very conversational, very easy read. It's not a science book. It's not even a popular science book. It's a self-help and personal development book, is the best way to look at it. So it applies to people that are dating, non-dating. Yeah, we have some tactical advice, but it's really understand yourself and understand the other gender in a very fundamental level that you're not going to get in any other way. And that's really important. So the first part of the book is our evolutionary tendencies. The second is how modern society broke all of that. And then there's a guide for men from the women's perspective and a guide for women from the men's perspective. And you should read the whole book, as you said, because you'll understand yourself and the other gender.
Right. This aspect of writing a section for men, but with the parentheses, and by the way, women should read this as well.
Yeah, that's actually our subtitle for that part.
Yeah, it's really informative. It made me feel like, okay, you're not trying to tip off some special secrets or something that nobody is supposed to know, that about men that men aren't supposed to know from a woman's perspective, or vice versa. I really like that, and it is very conversational. I really appreciate the conversational tone of it. Let's start with a big question, though. You talk about behavioral tendencies. You used that word a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
What is a behavioral tendency, and how is it different from what we think of as being kind of hardwired in our genetic code?
Well, think of men and women, if I'm going to go all scientific, is overlapping distribution. So bell curves, right? And on most psychological and behavioral dimensions, men and women are the same, as my daughter likes to remind me. She
Give,
thinks
give,
it applies to
give me an
everything.
example.
Yeah. So intelligence,
Yeah,
verbal ability, stamina, a lot of things. Okay, but on some things, psychologically, if you look at the ocean model, which is one of the few that's validated across a bunch of domains, you'll find two dimensions where people, men and women, differ. And one of those is going to be your sensitivity to threats in the environment, or it's called N in the ocean model, neuroticism. It's an unfortunate label, but the women are more tuned to threats in their environment. Okay. And the other one that you're going to find is in essentially kind of aggression and risk-taking behavior. And again, so women tend to be more agreeable. And agreeableness
right.
means how you get along with others. Well, if you look at the fact that men on average are 25% larger and have 15 to 20 times the testosterone, which is essentially risk taking,
Yeah,
it's no surprise that women that are weaker and have to take care of helpless babies, evolutionarily speaking, are going to be more threat focused and more agreeable because they
right.
can be dominated physically. So essentially, the main difference that cuts across men and women is our willingness to take risks. In fact, women bred men to take risk, and men bred women to be selective investors in this story and to pick their single best choice. That's called hypergamy. So you have to, as a woman, I'm looking for a guy that's going to upgrade my chances of survival and reliably provision for me and be a good father as well. Um,
I'm glad you used the term hypergamy because we're going to come back to that a little bit later. I want to make sure that we have a discussion about that because
sure.
I love learning new words in books, and didn't expect to be learning new words in evolutionary
Okay. A
psychology.
vocab builder. Well, I'll probably put that on Dr. Lamore Godley, my brilliant co-author. She's much more solid on the science than I am.
But it's fantastic. So if I understand what you're saying correctly here, Tim, we have some undeniable differences in how we're built and the way that we have evolved evolutionarily for a long time.
Yes.
And it's hard to disentangle that, even with all of these modern overlays of swiping left and swiping right. Still, at the heart of it, we still have these tendencies. These are inclinations, if you will. Is
Well,
that a fair
think of it
word?
this way: the evolutionary reason, and again, being men of a certain age, evolution doesn't care about you or me, Tim. I mean, well, maybe we can still get involved in the gene pool or raising our grandkids or something in the future, but it's really about getting together, having children to the point where they can have their own children. That's the
Yeah,
name of the game. And so what from an evolutionary perspective, gender relations are about complementary needs. We need each other and we evolved each other for these very asymmetric roles in order to be able to raise kids effectively and reproduce in the gene pool. That's it. The happiness stuff, the soulmate stuff, the I'm going to remarry, after, my kids grow up, after the divorce stuff, evolution doesn't care about that because it doesn't impact the gene pool. So that's
yeah.
the brutal truth.
And yet, if I understand the book correctly, that evolutionary stuff is still at play, regardless of what the current circumstances are. Is that correct?
Exactly right. So one of the things that one of the things we talk about, a huge insight from the book, is that it's not just men versus women. There are also massive differences by life stage. So they've done a lot of studies, and if you look at economics, sexual economics, or behavioral economics, and large populations, we see these tendencies, which is that all men prefer younger women. That has to do with fertility. Most of the women's values start super high around 18, 20, 22, and drops for the rest of their lives. And that biggest drop comes from 20 to 40 when you're capable of having kids. So the guy is subconsciously thinking, okay, I have to have a kid. I want it to survive, and it's going to take many years to raise. I might want to have more than one kid with this woman. So the fertility window is the main thing that determines men's preferences. And we can find that by visual inspection, waist to hip ratios, facial features. And for women, it's not so much. It's like will he be able to bring home food every day? Because there are no 401ks, there are no houses to live in. It's just like, go hunt and bring me something to feed us and the kids and the rest of the tribe.
Mhm.
And from that standpoint, being a good provider meant literally showing up every day and being competent enough to navigate the world and take risks. And so men don't know how to do that when they're young. Young men are useless to women and to other men because, I mean, if I had to teach my teenage son how to do stuff, it's going to take years to turn him into a viable man. And so men peak earlier. There's a flat peak between 40 and 60 or so. And the crossover point's at 30. That's when, on average, women's sexual marketplace value, their kind of on average desirability, falls below that of the average man. So a lot of this depends on life stage too. I'd be giving very different advice, not just to men and women, but like, how old are you? Have you had kids yet? All of those things really factor into it.
Yeah. So, to what degree did you and your co-author discover that the standard tropes about the differences between men and women hold up or don't hold up?
They do hold up, but we put value judgments on top of them. So let's take this idea of crossing curves, which is a whole chapter in the book where you have like that 30 is the crossover point. So if we put that crossover X in a box, at the top of the box, you have people that are of equal value. At the bottom of the box, you have people of equal value on average. And in the middle, where that crossover point, you have people of equal value. Well, let's look at each of those. They represent things that exist in our society. At the top of the box, equal value is young women with well-resourced older men. That's your traditional model. That's both of them trading at the peak value they can have. So for rich women, they used to have these coming out parties into society. Get the fruit while it's fresh when you're 16. And if the woman's really that exceptionally beautiful and fertile, you owe us a dowry and there's some economic exchange because you're not powerful enough to have her just straight up exchange, right? So, but you put cultural names on it and all of a sudden she's a gold digger. Or why is she with that old guy, right? So that's cultural.
Yeah.
In the middle of the box, we have the crossover of men and women are equals. And that's kind of the current model, egalitarian, and we're all the same in all respects. And what we found is that so the age of first marriage in the US for women has shifted from 23 many decades ago to 29 and a half, which is right at that crossover point.
Dramatic change.
It's a huge change, like career first or screw around first or some combination of those, but basically delay marriage as long as possible until there's no advantage. But the thing to realize is that crossing of equals is only a point in time. And then at the bottom of the box, again, equal value would be older woman, younger man. Well, she didn't get the resourcing, or she's on round 2 of that, but she can collect some good genes on the way out, right? So that's your cougar town, we call it. And again, that's a very common thing, right? It's like, the hot, 45-year-old and finally the gym bro at 25 is getting some attention from an attractive woman. So that's also an equivalence point. So, but again, it's laden with stereotypes.
Yeah. And it does sound like this is a marketplace. It is competitive in that regard, right?
Yeah. And everybody, by the way, we've also seen strong evidence that going outside of your kind of quality isn't going to work for you. Because if there's an imbalance, if one person knows they can do way better, the other person's going to become highly jealous and know that they're a flight risk, if you will. So whether the man or the woman has more optionality, the point is you got to find someone at your level. So the way we describe this, it's like the junior high cafeteria where the jocks sit with the cheerleaders and the nerds are like whatever, playing Magic the Gathering at their own table. But you can't really go too far outside of your actual value and hope that there's some Pretty Woman scenario, the billionaire is going to swoop in with the roses for you.
In my own experience playing in bands in high school and college, I happened to be in bands with bass players that were basically Greek Adonises. Like they looked like they were carved from stone, in ancient Greece. These guys were so perfect and charming and everything. And I can't tell you the number of very attractive young women that came up to me with a little note in their hands with their phone number on it.
Can you give this to my favorite god?
Can you give this to the bass player was the question they would ask me. And that was so disparaging. It was it felt just terrible for me, but it was a reminder of I'm not a 10.
And very few men are, that brings us to a really important point. Men and women select and attract differently.
Yeah, right. Right. And like you said, they should attract differently, right? Because
yes.
of all these evolutionary things that have been built into us for all these years, right?
Yeah. So who has the bigger risk? Like we were talking about, the woman. You place all your bets on one guy, you get pregnant by him, you don't know if he's going to leave. You don't know if he can actually go find food on a reliable basis. You don't know if he'll be a good father. So the risk is
Yeah.
on the woman, right? And so she has to be much choosier and evaluate things that aren't, again, obvious from visual inspection. That waist to hip ratio of zero point 0.7, blind men prefer that. It's not something that Cosmo magazine has taught men to expect. So it's just like, how fertile are you? Can you push out a bowling ball at 9 months, and make a viable human, right? That stuff is absolutely visually obvious. Are you a good provider? Not so much. And so women tend to have these two axes in how they select men. And one is the ability to provision, and the other is the attractiveness, which then having the body of a Greek god helps, but also
Yeah.
swagger, being in a band in the first place, having some aggression and a willingness to take risks. Those are all attractive qualities. So that's why women, especially earlier in their lives, go for the bad boys. But if that doesn't materialize into steady provider at some point, they'll cut that loose. They'll cut that guy loose. You don't see middle-aged women on the back of Harleys very often. They've passed that
It
stage.
still happens, but it's not.
Yes. Well, I not to judge, but they're probably don't have all of their teeth if they're still on the back of a Harley. Okay.
So okay, and yet not all human relationship issues are evolutionary.
No.
Yeah.
So again, there's cultural stuff, and you take someone from one culture and their expectations. It's really hard to span experiences, from different civilizations, I would say, and different religions, and none of us are perfect. We were raised by imperfect parents. We all got our share of intergenerational trauma handed to us. We all have our specific life circumstances, and my wife's a social worker, and they talk about this ACE score, adverse childhood events. It's like, were you raised by drunks? Were you beaten up? Were you neglected? Did you go hungry? Okay, so you get an ACE score. Well, some of us got handed more than our share of stuff, and that's going to impact you and how you approach it, because your individual development, your nervous system, all of it is wired differently. So you have that level, then you have the cultural level, and then you have these underlying tendencies.
Yeah. So these things that are impacting us on what I would call a contextual basis or environmental basis, right? That these things do matter. We can't just say all of it is bound up in our evolutionary tendencies.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tim, because you're right. These are tendencies, and tendencies means, like, if you're going to swim in this direction against the riptide, know that you're doing it against the riptide. Okay,
Yeah.
just have no illusions about that. And we feel like, yeah, the individual stuff, you can go to therapy or do personal development work. Great, do that anyway. Become a better human. Okay, overcome your childhood stuff. Stop blaming your parents. Whatever your deal is. Okay, get rid of your addictions. Become a better human, and then you'll draw better humans. But at some point, then it goes back to, okay, well, now you have a pool of different humans available to you, and that stuff is still subject to all these kind of evolutionary rules.
Early in the book, you introduce a concept called pair bonding. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So the reason, evolutionarily speaking, that we pair bond is to produce kids. And there are actually 3 different chemical systems that fire in the body to create what we call love. So love isn't something that, like you see this on dating profiles. I'm looking for my soulmate, my last first date, my ride or die, whatever word salad you want to put on top of it. Basically, it means that I'll know it when I see it. And the fact is, it happens to you involuntarily. That's the reason we call it falling in love. So these chemical triggers fire, and there's 3 different ones, and they don't all happen in order or at the same time or the same for both people in a potential couple. So the first one is lust. I want to screw you and make babies with you. Okay. Now, the second one is I want to screw only you. That's exclusivity. I want to focus my attention obsessively on you. Okay. And the third is the long-term pair bond. I want to stick around and raise kids with you.
Yeah. The
And
commitment. Yeah.
yeah. And so all of those are chemical reactions. We know the chemical pathways by which they operate. So somebody might be just like, I'm not sure I want to go on a second date with him. And he's picking out color coordinated Christmas sweaters already. I mean, they're in different stages of that bonding. So the key thing to understand is love happens to you when somebody happens to be standing in front of you. It's nothing you can choose. It's nothing you can pick out. You can be in a different environment looking for people, but you can't pick when those chemical things will happen. And they only last a few months or a couple of years. So that kind of passionate love phase where you're obsessed with someone, that will fade, guaranteed. And again, doesn't mean that longer term relationships aren't possible, but we're not set up with the chemical support for it. Let's just put it that way.
That's beautifully said. We're not set up for the chemical support of just passion for an infinite amount of time.
Well, it's like, yeah, so you're being sold this by matchmakers, and I work, obviously a lot in the industry with understanding matchmakers or dating sites and things like that. And, you told us you just need to find the right person and all your problems will be solved. And then you'll be with them forever. And that happily ever after lifelong monogamy is assumed to be the default when in fact it's not at a species level. And it sets us up
I thought that was true. They told me that.
Exactly. And I paid them 25 grand to go on a few dates. Yes,
exactly. But that's not the case.
It's not the case. Again, both men and women are non-monogamous. And as a species, we're non-monogamous. And women and men, quote unquote, cheat. Even that's a loaded cultural word for different reasons. But if you look at even just within our great ape cousins, the wide variety of stuff. So gorillas have a harem set up. The dominant silverback controls access to the females. So his testicles are inside his body and have very low capacity because he's guaranteed to spread his seed. Whereas pygmy chimps, bonobos, they're basically like free love monkeys and, just like jump on my boner. I literally saw this at the San Diego Zoo. The guy's sitting there with a boner and the woman just jumps on it. They screw and then she leaves 30 seconds later. It's like, that was a good start to my morning, but that's a matriarchal society because of uncertain paternity. So the allegiances are through the mother's line. You always know who the mother is. And very different. And we're kind of in this weird in between, evolutionarily speaking, where we want to have sexual optionality, and it takes us so long to raise a viable human that the strategy of just impregnate as many people as possible isn't going to work if you're not willing to put in the provisioning and the resources to raise your own kids. So we have a tension. So men will look for sexual opportunity as a side bet. Women cheat for different reasons. They have a plan B in case their guy starts underperforming and starts backsliding. And then they monkey branch over to at least as good or a better situation, but they have to have that backup. So men are concerned about physical fidelity and uncertain paternity, because you don't want to raise someone else's kid. That would be the worst evolutionary insult ever.
Yeah.
Not even your own genes. And women care about the emotional attachment. So if you say to a man, if a woman says to a man, well, I just slept with him, it didn't mean anything, that's not going to fly very well with a guy because sexual jealousy is about the certainty of your paternity. Whereas the worst thing you can say to a woman is like, oh, honey, we didn't even have sex. I just really care about her and she's a really good friend. Because the woman's afraid of that emotional attachment getting transferred to somebody else in the longer term.
That's beautiful that you pointed that out. Thank you. Because those differences that have evolved as these evolutionary tendencies are big and bold, even though we've got all these societal mores and cultural overlays and things. This is pretty common across all cultures, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, exactly. And again, that's our standard. If you want to understand the evolutionary psychology of it, look at things that are across all social structures, across all times. So is 100% lifelong fidelity across all social cultures across all time? Definitely not. Okay,
Yeah.
So that tells you something about our monogamy and the willingness of men and women to play sexual side bets. By the way, men used to be the kings of this, but women are catching up really fast in terms of extramarital affairs and stuff like that.
And why is that?
Because there's no consequence of you. I can bond you as a woman. I can bond a man to me very strongly sexually without the consequences of Russian roulette and having a baby with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna have more plan Bs, backup plans with high quality men whom I want to get into my orbit.
So is that basically our environment, our cultural norms, and the changes in our modern society kind of overlaying to allow the evolutionary tendencies to come out?
Yeah, the evolutionary tendencies have always been there, but the risk rewards have changed. So the biggest change was women being able to control their own reproductive destiny, which is a really powerful thing, right? So if I'm
Yeah.
not afraid of getting pregnant by the wrong guy who's not going to be there to father my children, then that changes a lot of like my actual urges and needs and things that I would want to get out of life.
Can we switch over to talking about first dates for just a
Of
couple minutes
course.
here? So, app first dates versus walking into a bar and seeing that hot person across the way and making the first move. Is
Mm.
there a better way? Is one better than the other? Or does it
Um,
matter?
yes, it matters, and no, you can't do anything about it. Here's here's the dirty math. More than half of people now meet on dating sites.
Right,
That's
right.
the majority of all human relationships being mediated through dating sites and online dating. So it's inescapable at a social level. I mean, you can go join a meetup group and go on hikes and, or do other things in person. By the way, we recommend that in the book to free your dependency on it. But there aren't as many places to meet people face to face anymore, and especially with people that are both working. If most of your time is spent at work, you're going to meet people at work. Well, guess what? In this moment, culturally, that's not an option either because HR is going to sue you. You know,
Yeah,
there's and so we have these again, this landmines of behavioral norms and men and women trying to figure out how to be together 24/7, and we weren't designed to be. The men were designed again cartoonishly to go off in a hunting party for several days. The women had to take care of the helpless lumps of babies and were digging roots and tubers out of the river bank and stuff like that. So you essentially had male and female societies that existed side by side. Once in a while, we get together to feast and screw. And but even think about your typical Thanksgiving. What happens after this Thanksgiving feast?
people sit around, right?
Well, they self-segregate,
Into groups of like kind,
men and
basically.
women.
Yeah.
The guys will smoke cigars or watch the football game or throw a football in the backyard. The women will catch up on all the social stuff in the kitchen, while under the pretext of cleaning. So it's not like just men are useless and they don't want to help clean. Those are like, you guys go off and do your thing. We'll go off and do ours. It's very natural to have just single gender groups. And what we're trying to do is, and I believe, my personal belief is that we're trying to square that circle in the workplace by saying, well, we should coexist 40 hours a week with each other and have no problems. And that's one of the root causes of the problems, is that we weren't designed to essentially be in a co-gender environment that much of the time. Or incidentally, in dyads, in pairs, that's unnatural too. You're spending 24/7 with your partner. That's not normal either.
That's right.
We needed
That's
long breaks. So absence makes the
yeah.
heart grow fonder. We had long breaks from each other, and we don't anymore. The idea that we're going to put all this weight on a nuclear family or a couple is really dangerous and corrosive.
It's really hard.
Hey Groovers, we want to take a moment away from our conversation to thank you for listening to Behavioral Grooves. If you enjoy the conversations we're having and want to help us keep the groove going, here are a few simple ways that you can support the show.
First off, subscribing to our Substack is a great way to stay connected with us between episodes. The weekly newsletter provides you with cool insights that are beyond the episodes, and they get delivered straight to your inbox.
And if you haven't already, leaving a review or a rating of the podcast on a platform like Apple or Spotify or YouTube helps other curious minds discover us. And there's two great things about that. One, it gives us a boost, and two, it costs nothing.
And it only takes a second, but it makes a huge difference for us. Plus, we love hearing from you, so don't be shy. Leave us a review or give us a quick thumbs up.
We're coming up on 500 episodes, and we're doing this because we love the conversations we have with our guests.
Yeah, we also want to do it because we love bringing you insightful, behavior-changing content every week, and we hope that some of those insights will help you find your groove. We are talking to Tim Ash about his new book, Primal Dating, and I want to continue this conversation on first dates. How much does the first date matter when it comes to building a successful long-term relationship?
Well, I'm going to flip that back on, saying it's probably going to start with online dating. But for both sides, it's a filtering process. So you have to swipe on somebody. They have to respond and like you. Then you have to have text game. Then you escalate to a phone call. Then you go to the first date. And if you're not doing efficient filtering up through the first date, you've already lost, because what would you call it? The cost of a first date is significant. It's a half a day of your life. It's planning it. It's financial. It's getting dressed up and groomed and having to spend time with this person that you find out is completely incompatible with you. That's a high cost. So these days, it's more of a filtering process, and you have to be efficient about every step of it. And there's no way to avoid that.
So if there is such a high cost, sticking with these economic metaphors,
Okay.
is there also a sunk cost fallacy that we feel like, oh man, I put all this time and energy into getting ready for this first date and it was okay, but I should probably just go again because maybe conditions weren't optimal?
Well, I would say that it's again, it's not what happens on the first date or how much weight you put in. In fact, no, there's the opposite of the sunk cost fallacy, is people are willing to cut and run at any stage of this process I describe, including the first date or including the first time you even sleep together.
Yeah.
You may get ghosted. In fact, that's the expectation these days.
The expectation
is I do not have to respond to you. And regardless of how wonderful you thought the previous step in this process was, you may never hear from me again. That's the cold reality. No, I'd say it's kind of the opposite. People are seen as disposable, as interchangeable, that there's always more options out there because I can keep swiping infinitely and finding attractive potential partners. So there's fear of missing out. So if you look at it that way, it's become more brittle. It's harder to form relationships, and they can end. And the expectation is that I don't owe you anything.
How does that change a dater's approach then? If I know that I could get dropped at any moment, does it influence the way we behave in those early exchanges?
It should, in the sense that it's a perfect vehicle for, I'd say, personal growth, in the sense of like, do your best and step back. That's like a very Tao Te Ching kind of thing to say, like, do your best, but have no expectations.
And when was the last time that worked for you?
Well, it's a lifelong practice. We're never going to get there. But it does teach you a lot. It's like, God, I thought we had a great connection. And again, you might at some point get chemically bonded to someone, even on a phone call or on a first date, and even without sleeping with them. And so you're invested because your chemistry is working and trying to get you to mate. And they're like, yeah, I'm not feeling it. And doesn't. So it's a tough balancing point. So you should adjust your approach to essentially treating it like a job. This is one of the symmetric pieces of advice we give to both men and women. You're going to have to filter. You're going to have to use your time effectively, and you shouldn't have any expectations. So what you're describing, traditional dating, which you and I are familiar with, is basically non-existent. People have polarized into like the red-pilled goblins of the manosphere, the shock troopers of the feminist movement, and that traditional, I'm going to go on several dates with you approach to dating is basically non-existent.
And yet, a more traditional dating environment could actually be healthier, right? To building a longer-term
relationship. As a judgment, and we really try to stay away from those. I would say that meeting in person is you learn a lot more about the person more quickly. And so you should look for opportunities to do that and get off of the online as much as possible. But remember, we had tribes of, Dunbar's number, the famous sociologist, who said our brains are based on the complexity of the social groups we form, of about 100 to 200 people. So let's say it's on the small side, 100 people, 50 of them are women, 20 of them are of breeding age and available. And there's competition from 100 guys for those 20 women, including the ones that are married and in relationships. Okay, so you might have two and a half choices. One of them has most of her teeth. So that was the in-person option. It was the lack of optionality. Now we have this false sense that we have infinite optionality when we don't. Just because you're in sitting there in your car and willing to swipe for a half hour doesn't mean those women would go out with you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of distortions in that sexual marketplace. I can go through them if you like.
I want to get to what I'm thinking of is some of your closing thoughts.
Sure.
But before we get there, there's another comment that you wrote that romantic love is a beautiful lie. A beautiful lie. Tell us what you mean by romantic love being a beautiful lie.
That it's going to solve all of our problems and that it will last forever. Again, that's what we're culturally, that's what we're sold by Hollywood, by Madison Avenue, and it's just sets up for a lot of pain and expectations, and it's not likely to happen. I'm sorry for anybody to stay in that in love state your whole life. Now, that's not to say that you can't, as an individual, have expectations of your relationships or loyalty or actually having a soulmate or somebody you can grow through. Okay, but realize that these are really, really rare things for you to track in your life as you change together in the same direction for the rest of your lives. That is not what we're set up for. We're designed to be good enough to make babies with someone.
I like that.
So it's a difference between survival, which is what evolution cares about, and thrival, and you having a good life or in a pair as a human being. So you have to actively work for thrival, and even then it's not guaranteed. But the evolutionary stuff and all this ugly behavior and all these tendencies, they are good overall survival strategies. That's why our species continues. Nothing in there about your happiness.
You use the term good enough, and it really got my attention because it reminds me of the behavioral economics term satisficing.
Yeah, satisficing. I learned about that in college. Absolutely.
Exactly. And we've talked to relationship psychologists in the past about how people who are maximizers, who are the super type A, everything has to be perfect, perfectly well organized, and that their expectations of a relationship are extremely high, that they have a harder time finding really successful relationships than the satisficers do. The satisficers actually can live long and happy and successful relationships, in part because they're willing to do with good enough. Is that
and I think it's true. I heard a YouTube segment by Orion Taraban. He wrote a book called The Value of Others, which is strictly looking at kind of this sexual marketplace from a behavioral economics point of view, right? But one of his video segments, not in the book, but he mentioned that you basically have two strategies as in dating. You can date a lot of people, or you can be satisfied with someone you meet early on along the way. And he uses this small town versus big town metaphor. If you're going to travel all over the world, you can say, well, is this the best city to live in? I don't know. San Diego is great, but Barcelona is even better. And I've never been to London or Tokyo, so you're going to keep trying to up your game, but you're going to spend decades doing that and trying to find the right person. Whereas if you met someone in your small town, in your neighborhood, little league game, and you're happy with them, just stick with that one. The problem is actually in the middle, where that there's probably someone better, but you haven't done the work to sample enough. So high school sweetheart, maybe it'll work out. Woman of the world has had lots of options and seen it all, and it picks the best guy. That might work out. But in between is where we mess with ourselves.
That's beautifully said. Thank you for sharing that. That's a terrific observation. Okay, I want to move to closing thoughts.
Sure.
The closing thoughts section of the book
Ooh,
are just peppered with really interesting insights. And so I just want to give credit to you and your co-author for writing it and for creating something that looked like a list of sort of FAQs, like burning questions that need to be answered. I'm not going to I don't want to go through all of them, but I do want to ask you, pick your favorite child. Which, if
ah,
there's one that you have to give some advice to someone today, what would one of those be? And I'm just going to mention a couple that I
sure.
thought were particularly interesting. The dating market is broken. We've talked about that. Women have changed dramatically. Hypergamy is hurting men. This is getting back to our hypergamy issue. We need each other, and embrace your instincts are another couple that I thought were particularly
Mhm.
interesting. Um, what strikes you as your favorite child right now? This isn't a go to your grave question, by the way. This is
Yeah, yeah.
just
No,
for
there's so that last part of the book, the closing thoughts was just our personal reflections on what all this stuff means and how to philosophically and spiritually approach all of this. And
which is probably why I loved it, because there's this philosophical insight in the way that you wrote that. They're beautifully done. I want to go back to hypergamy because I promised that I would get your take on hypergamy as an issue that we face today.
Mhm.
And first of all, what does hypergamy mean, so that listeners don't have to look it up? And then why is it a problem?
Yeah, well, um, hypergamy means the woman is always going to choose her single best bet. I think there's some Charlie Sheen quote or something like, "Yeah, the reason she's not happy with you is because you were never her first choice," which is
Ouch!
brilliant.
Ouch!
Yeah, but it's true. Maybe it wasn't him who said it, but something along those lines was said, and it's absolutely true. So the woman is going to look at someone who upgrades her lifestyle, that can be a more consistent provider, that will be there, be reliable as a partner, and upgrade her lifestyle both. The thing is, that doesn't change when women do economically better. And so now you have in this country 60% of bachelor's degrees awarded to women, women out earning men in major metro areas, period, until they choose to have a child. So women's economic empowerment, you can say, is a wonderful thing. And they're still looking for guys that will do better. And so what you basically have is the dating marketplace has become a hell, especially for educated women, especially for educated middle-aged women who chose to put career first. It's become hell for 90% of men that are functionally invisible because, no, if I have a bachelor's degree, chances are I'm not going to even go out with the guy who has an associate's degree or is the plumber or is the electrician. So men have become functionally invisible because they're not the providers. And then the chads, those top 5-10% of guys that have the money and the looks, all the women are competing for them, and they're never going to settle with any one woman. Why would you? You have infinite optionality. And so the chads are having a great time. Everybody else is really, really pissed off and frustrated. So hypergamy leads to this: women still want to upgrade their lifestyle no matter how well they're doing. And they bred men to take risks. So going back to kind of close the loop on risk, we were talking about at the beginning. Think about it this way: on average, men and women are the same, but along most dimensions, women have bred us to roll the dice. Men are either really successful or you're a fuck up. It's using French. Le fuck up. Yes.
Yeah, we speak French, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So what does that mean? There are more geniuses among men and more idiots. There are more cowards and more heroes. And along every dimension, the bell curve is the same, but the spread is very, very different. And so women are just looking to mate with the winners. They're at the finish line waiting for the winner. And there's actually strong evidence for this. So if you look at mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down the mother's line, versus, obviously X chromosome is passed down to father's line, there are twice as many women in our genetic past as men. I'm just going to leave you with
Wow.
that thought. So what does that mean? Women were choosing the men, and half the men didn't make the cut. It's always been thus. And so in a way, you could say things are distorted and messed up, and gee, aren't guys having a hard time and all of this stuff? And that's true. It's painful right now. We're recalibrating things. But the fact that most men didn't get to reproduce has always been the case. So there is no such thing as an involuntary celibate. If you can't make a sexual opportunity and spread your genes as a man, that's just the default setting. And so again, I'll just leave you with the thought that evolution is ruthless. It doesn't care about your happiness. It cares about raising the fitness of the population at a population level over time and survival chances. So
Thank
women
you.
are the choosy investors and will always be. And since they're doing economically better, that breaks a lot of things about the relationship market.
Beautifully said.
I think that the real key is that to understand why the current dating market is broken and how deep this rabbit hole goes. In other words, there's a massive issue with relationship formation around the world in all advanced societies. Birth rates are plummeting. We're in our lifetime probably going to see reverse of this 10,000 year trend of growing populations. And when it starts going down the other side of the water slide, it goes down just as fast. So if your replacement fertility is 2.1 children per woman, and you have a lot of industrialized societies where it's 1, that means every generation is going to half in size. It doesn't take too many of those to depopulate the planet. So this goes deep. And so my main kind of meta takeaway under all of those is understand yourself, understand the other gender, and do it from a place of empathy. Don't do it from judgments. The worst thing you can do is polarize and to say, men are the problem, or women are the problem, or men just need to step up, or women just need to stop being such gold digging whores, or the stuff you hear is just unbelievable from this is the dominant conversation. So it's just like, understand our tendencies and view it from a lens of empathy. We need each other. And regardless of whether you choose to have children, that some of the deepest psychological and spiritual juice and testing you're going to have is probably in an intimate relationship in your life. And so I'm not willing to forego that, no matter how hard things are. So it's looking at it from a empathetic viewpoint while recognizing the massive differences between us.
Now let's turn to music. Let's talk
I love
about
the pivot. Awesome.
There's no elegance in that. I'm going to tell you that. Last time we were together, you talked about Pat Metheny, you talked about Chet Baker, you talked about Elvis Costello, who got inspired to write Almost Blue from Chet Baker's Almost Blue. Lovely circular connection about that.
Well, actually, Chet Baker performed Almost Blue as Costello's composition, but I love Chet Baker's cover of it.
It's fantastic. Miles Davis, Salsa,
Kind of Blue,
Almonte.
Yeah.
What would be on your playlist today if you were stranded on a desert island and could only take 2 artists with you?
Okay, so I'm writing my new book, as I mentioned, Primal Wellness, right now. And so I get into the mode by listening to music. And you know what I'm listening to? A lot of Steely Dan.
A lot of Steely Dan for this new book.
Well, just as my background, like, because it just like you just see, I think that, well, my judgments, 70s was peak rock.
Okay.
And 70s and Steely Dan was one of the most innovative bands of all time, and their perfectionism and what they expected of their session musicians, how they composed, the sophistication, the crossover of jazz, rock, and R&B. It was all just incredible. I heard this phrase once that Steely Dan is your favorite band's favorite band.
Yeah. They are the musicians, aren't they?
Yeah. And so I just I keep going back that just I can listen to FM on repeat forever, or Josie.
Is it the whole catalog, or is it just?
Well, I have a playlist of my favorite Steely Dan songs, and I just let it run for hours while I write.
And you listen to music while you work?
Yeah. It makes me creative.
How can you do that?
Well, because a lot of it is they just have usually a chorus or a bridge or two, but most of it's instrumental, so it doesn't pull me out of the writing and the verbal stuff too much.
Yeah, I've also heard that people will listen to music that they're really familiar to, in part because it's almost like just noise in the background. It's so familiar that they're not intensely listening to try to figure something out, or what is this word, or oh, I can't wait for this lick or something.
Yeah. Because you've overplayed it so much that the surprise is gone, right?
That's right.
Yeah, that's probably true. So I guess, yeah. Oh my God, I've turned Steely Dan into elevator music. That is a horrible thought.
It's a sad day in Mudville when Steely Dan becomes elevator music. Or somebody even thought it was yacht rock. Oh,
yeah, that I never understood that characterization.
No, yacht rock in general, I still don't understand the characterization.
To me, that's like Jimmy Buffett stuff. I mean, the parrot heads. So that's yacht rock. It's like the stuff if you're barbecuing on the back of your boat and getting loaded on beers, that's yacht rock.
That's right.
There's no way Steely Dan gets put into that category.
That is not the category. I couldn't agree more. Tim Ash, it is always a pleasure to see you. And thanks for rejoining us as a guest today on Behavioral Grooves.
Oh, Tim, it's been my pleasure. And if people want more info about any of this stuff, just go to primaltim.com and you'll get links to Primal Dating and the Unleash Your Primal Brain book, and then the new Primal Wellness book when that comes out soon.
Working the Primal brand. I love it.
Yeah, primaltim.com.
Welcome to our grooving session where Tim and I share ideas on what we learned from our discussion, or Tim's discussion with Tim Ash, have a free-flowing conversation, and groove on whatever else comes into our primordial dating minds. There you go.
Primordial. Okay. Yeah, because that's it, right? That's where we're going back to. That's what.
I guess it's the primal dating, isn't it? Not primordial. Did I just is primordial?
Yeah.
Does it mean the same thing?
Oh, I don't know. Something pretty close.
I meant primal, and maybe my lack of understanding of vocabulary might have just messed all of that up, but hey, it's all right. It's the primal dating minds. It's the brains that are wired for being in small tribes, for being in a very threatening environment for most, that we are as what did our one guest call us? Just meat bags out in the savannah.
Yes.
We are not the apex hunters that we weren't for much of our existence. So yeah.
Right. We've had human history is filled with a lot of kind of bad days. We've had some
kind of sitting around hiding, being in our tribes, but we were in our tribes, and that was what kept us safe. And that was how we also found our mates, and that was an interesting piece. So
it is. Yeah. Okay. So
all right. I'm going to have to interview you for this grooving session, because I wasn't there. So what did you take away from the Tim's conversation here? Yeah.
Team Tim, team connection.
Team Tim.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is that our behavioral tendencies are not hardwired, right? That they are about probabilities of behavior, and they're not fixed scripts. And I think that this is and now we heard this with Paul Eastwick, right?
Yep.
Who is an evolutionary psychologist. And so in some ways, it's a very similar message. And I like that. And my conversation with Tim Ash absolutely went into that direction to remind us that this probability aspect of who we are is something that we can overcome, right? That dating will trigger these ancient tendencies because it involves a lot of uncertainty and status and risk and social evaluation. All those things are absolutely ancient, and they are primordial. But we also have ways of countering them, and I think that it's good to remember that we do have tools.
So we should just ignore these, right?
Well,
these tendencies?
No, actually, I don't think that makes us more enlightened.
Okay.
That's a fair question. But if we do ignore them, it can kind of make these things sort of feel mysterious, and we can get into conspiracy theories about how relationships work and get way out of hand.
Well, it brings to mind, like the work of Danny Kahneman on dual processing theory, this idea of system one, system two. And
Yeah.
what I'm hearing you say is that we probably need to pull ourselves out of maybe system one thinking a lot, and maybe move ourselves into system two, looking at the emotional context,
Yep.
where we are, kind of the larger picture of this, which seems counterintuitive because shouldn't love just strike us like lightning and it should be an immediate thing?
Doesn't have to. Love doesn't have to strike us like lightning. Just because Hollywood has romanticized that doesn't necessarily make it better or make our relationships better. Yeah, and
Uh,
I agree with your comment. I think
yeah.
that that's
What
true.
else, Tim? What else did you
You know,
get?
I would say that a lot of the problems that we have in dating are sort of can be related to being misplaced in the way that we think about where we should be rather than just where we are. Right.
Okay.
So life stage is a really important aspect of this. The evolutionary pressures that shift us across all of our lifespan, basically our risk tolerance and our priorities change. And so,
Oh,
of course, that's going to influence the way we think about relationships. That's the short story.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And let it happen. Right.
so the person I might have been attracted to when I was younger and wanted to date might not be that same person if I was out on that dating scene today. Is that what you're saying? Or
That
is it
that is
even
it.
different from that?
That is it. That is it. Now there are great stories that are romanticized about, people having a high school sweetheart and things don't work out, but that first love, right? That first big fireworks explosion of romance and love. Um, doesn't get manifested, so you marry someone else and you go on for years and then you get divorced and it's like, I want to go back to my high school sweetheart because they're
Yeah.
available right now too. And you know what, in a different life stage, things can just be completely misaligned. It's not that we have bad motives, but all those changing priorities, all those risk tolerances, all the things that we've learned could be completely misaligned with life
Mhm.
stage. So I think that it's important to think about, where am I at right now? What is it that I really want in a relationship, and where am I? Start with a good inventory of how I'm doing.
That, so there's an interesting part to this then, Tim. Is this like for myself, who's been married almost 30 years, and I know lots of long-term relationships, there's a there's a potential connotation from this, which is, do you that person you married when you were younger, is that still the person you want to be with? Is that why, did you and Tim talk about like divorce and that kind of thing? Is that
We
part of
didn't
the reason?
Yeah, we didn't get into that we didn't get into that in any meaningful way. However, I think that I'm just going to riff a little bit here. Yeah, our preferences do change over time. And either I think that to some degree, you kind of have to decide, is this a relationship that I want to continue to invest time into or not? And from a behavioral science perspective, I think about the work that Ron Kivitz and Itamar Simonson did on our preferences, and our
Yeah.
preferences change over time. They're context dependent,
Yeah.
um, and that's okay. If you want a relationship that continues to last, you're going to have to figure out how to adjust as the time goes by, basically.
It's interesting because I think there's also this, you know, joint life that you're sharing. And so your preferences are being impacted by that other person as well. So again, part of this is that, yeah, your preferences might change, but you and that other person are maybe changing together. And
Right,
so if you're
right.
doing this, you talk about it. It's like, yeah, I loved you and you were a very different person when I married you, but I love you more today because now you're a different person, I'm a different person, and we're growing in that.
Right. And you still have all these shared experiences to look back to. I think that those are really important. The third thing that I wanted to mention about my discussion with Tim was we talked about this dating marketplace thing. Now, this is something that came up with Paul Eastwick as well, right? But this idea of it's a choose me market, and Tim Ash talked a lot about how the sort of the economics and the supply and demand of it. And I think that human pair bonding really depends on repeated interaction and shared experience. Right.
Human pair bonding? Is
Sorry.
that like the technical term for dating?
Dating.
What human pair bonding?
It didn't sound as funny when it was going through my head, but it is pretty funny.
It just came across as, oh, you're very smart. You're talking about human pair bonding. Or is that just like a one night stand? Is that a very technical term? Is that how this works? Or is this like long term dating? Is this like a special kind of relationship, this human pair bonding?
Okay, I'm moving on. The underlying problem with the marketplace thing is that we really don't have, like in economic marketplaces, you've got all the assessments of product value and product quality and distribution. Everything comes back to how much am I willing to pay for that?
Yeah.
And so there ends up being a measure, an economic measure, the financial measure that is uber alles. It oversees all. But the problem
is that like a human pair marketing market and
no,
big and like overarching and uber alla?
No, it's just Father Kester's voice from sophomore German class, actually, in my head. But
I'm loving it. I'm loving it. Keep going. Sorry. Yeah.
So, marketplaces in an economic sense have a single measure that everything can be, routed up to. But in human relationships, if we say that there's a marketplace, there are still 1,000 different factors. And the benefit of the complexity of human relationships is that you get to over time and time together, you get to work out what are the things that really are important and say, okay, these are the things that are most important to me and to us, rather than saying there's just one thing. And I think that this is kind of an important aspect of Tim Ash's message, is like marketplaces don't exist anywhere else in the world like they exist when it comes to our human connection, our human pair bonding.
Human pair bonding.
Yeah.
The Uberesque or whatever word you used that I had no clue what it meant. That's cool. I mean, I think that it kind of matches. So I didn't talk with Tim, but I was on the call with Paul, and there's this aspect of a marketplace where I know Paul was saying, look, that kind of the dating scene on apps and different things is not necessarily the best way of, going around trying to find a human pair bond that would be good for you, because our attraction emerges often. While we might have an initial like, oh, you check all these boxes, that's not really how attraction and love form. It's from that getting to know that person, and you start to see them differently. And again, your initial attraction, I've seen this, where it's like, ooh, cool. And then you talk to them and you're going, oh, no, not cool. So, and vice versa, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think Paul said this really well, that our preferences follow attraction, not the other way around. It's not that attraction leads, it's not. It's preferences follow attraction, not attraction follows preferences. So it's not that we set a preference up front and then we get attracted to that. It's the other way around. We get to know somebody and then we start to go, oh, this is what we like. And
I like that. I like how they do that. I like the way they treat me. I like the way that they do this or do that. Yeah, that's really cool.
And then that becomes my preference. after I've discovered that that's what I'm actually attracted to.
Preferences are so freaking weird.
Great.
Again, just from the work, that
Sheena
Kivitz and
Iyengar's work, right?
Simonson did.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, all of those, like, you would think, all right, I like A more than B, and I like B more than C, so therefore I should like A more than C, but that doesn't always play out either. I mean, we are just so messed up as humans. It's our brains, and we think that we should be able to have all this rational understanding of how love works. And that's just, basically what I'm saying is that it's a lot harder than we think it is. And, good luck, right?
Yeah. And so give yourself a little break, by the way. Just allow for some room for error, because that's it. But learn from those errors. I think that's the other thing. And, biology, life stage, context, all those things matter. And it's a lot to take in. So try to take time to do some inventory every now and then to try to get a handle on what's working and what's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it seems like understanding the system, understanding this information isn't necessarily a silver bullet and you're going to find love tomorrow, but it might help reduce some of the frustration and maybe increase your likelihood of being able to, do this in a way that goes, oh, this works. This is good.
Agreed. And so if you're looking for a book with some very practical uses that addresses very specific things about very specific environments and situations for men and for women, I think Tim Ash has written a book that is definitely for you. So I encourage you to pick that up.
Yeah, thank you. Now, if you like what we're doing here, and you want to support us and you want to get actually some other cool information beyond what we just talk about here, you can subscribe to our Substack, which it gives you some cool, keeps you informed on what we're doing and our latest episodes, but also we go in there and do more stuff. And you know what, Tim? They could subscribe to that for free. We allow that free, or
free is good.
Or
if they wanted to pay, would it cost them $100 a day?
No, it
$10 a day?
No.
$1 a day?
No. Well, if they wanted to, we'd take any of those, by the way. But no, it wouldn't. So it would cost about the cost of one coffee a month. If you go out to Starbucks, you go out to Caribou Coffee, which is the local one here, and you buy a fancy coffee. Not, I'm not saying just your plain regular coffee. You might have 2 of those coffees a month that you'd have to do, but then you'd have some change left over, with everything. But a coffee a month. So come on, people, you can just go and maybe instead of going out and getting that fancy frappe double shot of espresso, caramel latte, whatever, just brew your coffee at home for the day, put some fancy creamer in it, and then join our Substack and pay us. How about that?
Yeah. And if you don't feel like you're the right person to make that contribution, get somebody else to do it.
I don't drink coffee. How that doesn't make that
doesn't apply to me.
You don't drink coffee. There you go.
Right.
But there you go. Or
yes,
you could just join our Behavioral Grooves community Facebook page. We have over a couple hundred people are members, where we share questions every week. We have discussions. It's just it's a cool group that's there to help answer some of these big questions and how they see the world. And it just helps kind of go through this. And we're bringing a little behavioral science lens. And I think it's a good thing to join. So please join that. It's go out to Facebook, look for Behavioral Grooves community, and join the group. We invite you. We'd love to see you there. I'd love to have some conversations with all of our listeners here.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it is very conversant. Or give us an opportunity to earn our living by hiring us.
There you
Not
go.
with the proviso, it's not for dating advice. Okay, that's not.
No, but now we're experts. We've had 2 people on in the recent year about dating, so we are experts, aren't we?
No, we are no.
Oh, good.
Two
Thank God. 'Cause
conversations does not an expert make. But we are.
But we're in great relationships. Doesn't that count for anything?
Boy, it does, man. We are in great
Yeah.
relationships.
We are, and both of us are in really great relationships. So, you know,
Yes.
we'll just share our own personal. We won't charge you for that. There you go. But we will charge you for,
Yeah.
you know, the expertise that we do have a lot on, which is around incentives, around goal setting, around team development, around recognition programs. You know,
Yeah.
we can come in and help your organization improve on all of those. And whether that be consulting, whether it be doing workshops, we have done workshops for organizations all around the world, virtually, in person. We are
Yep.
keynote speakers. We can do all of that. So,
A lot of people say, but Kurt and Tim, do you ever work with companies that aren't among the top 50 companies in the whole world? And of course, the answer is yes.
no.
Occasionally.
Oh,
No.
sorry. You work with those. I, on the other hand, am very selective. No, yes, we do.
We work with a lot of different size companies. So reach out if you do have some interest. We hope.
And
Yeah.
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well-
I was going to pontificate more on how it would be fantastic to work with any of these people who are listening, because, you know, it's fun to work on these things. It's always
Yeah.
interesting, and we can make a difference. So,
Yeah. We hope that you enjoyed the conversation with Tim Ash and that you use it this week in your dating life or your relationship life as you go out and find your groove.